Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. So, today's episode is all about perspective, and kind of got me thinking actually just before this episode started, where I was taking a sip out of my coffee mug, just for context, in case you are watching this around the time of Halloween. It is nowhere near Halloween, but my favorite mug, which actually I'm drinking tea right now, love this tea, is actually a Halloween mug, just because it's like a big mug with a, the right amount of size. Now, some people might find that ridiculous and might not, drink out of this mug during certain times of the year, whereas others might not care. Like, I just don't care. It's my favorite mug. I'm going to drink with it, all year. Doesn't matter if it's Halloween or not. What I care about is that gives me what I want out of it. It gives me a big cup of tea. And kind of with that, with magic, I promise I'm getting to a point here, not just talking about tea and coffee mugs, but basically, you can read into something in one way, and another person can read into something in a completely different way, and it's nice to get the perspective of someone who is kind of behind the scenes of things, but also the way that we each read into what they say can be different, and I'd like to get your perspectives on this, so in the comments below, love to have a great discussion on this. Let's jump into why a recent post on Blogatog had me saying, Maro, come on. So, Blogatog, for those of you that don't know, is the, blog of Mark Rosewater, the head designer at Wizards. I believe that's the actual job title. I think it's head designer at Wizards. Let me know in the comments below. Basically, incredibly high up at Wizards, making a lot of monumental design decisions and directions for the company. And on Blog Talk recently, someone asked, and actually I tend to, some people get confused, and I do sometimes too, where the question is and where Mark's response is. I've highlighted Mark's response in blue, okay? I've seen a certain amount of hand-wringing around the community around the fact that the newer products are increasingly centered around Commander. There's a concern that the focus on Commander is coming at the expense of other formats, up to and including the entire tournament scene. Is there any worry along these lines within R&D as well? I know the Commander products sell super well, but I feel like from a design perspective, sales can't be the only concern. Mark's response. We've spent, I assume, sorry, there's a slight error right there, but I believe it's we've spent a lot of focus on other formats, with Standard getting extra attention. Standard play is significantly up, and the feedback we're getting from tournament players is that they're enjoying the current environment. Okay, so a couple of things here. And again, this is where you kind of, at least in my opinion, you got to read between the lines a bit, and this is kind of where, again, our perspectives might differ on what Mark is saying and also what Mark isn't saying. And why, again, I say, Mark, come on with something like this. I do appreciate that Mark Rosewater actually does respond to community, but some of the responses like this one can be very, in my opinion, kind of PR. Very public relations, kind of focused with that kind of a spin on it, versus actually saying kind of what's on everyone's mind. And sometimes not entirely answering the question or just kind of ignoring a certain question. Again, I know the Commander products sell super well, but I feel like from a design perspective, sales can't be the only concern. 100%. Like, that is something I most definitely agree with. And I don't think Mark really is addressing certain things like where, hey, the amount of products that are coming out for Commander specifically is kind of absurd. And how the focus on any other format is kind of just pushed to the side. I mean, last week showed off how, again, there was a debate around, not a debate, but a discussion around the fact that Modern Horizons 3 has Commander precons attached to it for a modern set. And the precons have cards that are not legal in Modern, even though it's Modern Horizons 3. And instead of making precons for Modern, they made precons for Commander because they are throwing everything they can at Commander players, essentially, because those things sell. So again, when it comes, again, the hand-wringing around the community about the fact that the newer products are increasingly centered around Commander, yeah, that's just true. Every single new product, essentially, has at least a Commander spin on it, or it just is Commander-focused inherently. Even, again, a product that is supposed to be for Modern, again, is focused on that. And Mark might be right that, Standard play is significantly up, and we've seen getting feedback from tournament players that they're enjoying the current environment. Mark might be right on that. Now, I would like Mark to delve further into that, is that paper or is that arena? My guess is that's mainly driven through arena. And when it comes to digital products versus paper products, that's completely different. And that's kind of the thing where, again, you don't really get to look behind the curtain in certain ways where, again, you are investing some resources into that, obviously, but like when it comes to actual physical products, the main focus is selling Commander players more paper. And when it comes to actually kind of digging into just how things have evolved over the past couple of years and just kind of how absurd that's been, I'm trying my best to kind of jump into these. And I'm sorry I'm going to be jumping around a little bit, but just to hear out my thoughts on this. So if we go to Scryfall, I love Scryfall. If you never use Scryfall, it is an invaluable resource for Commander. And you just kind of got to learn the syntax a little bit, but is Commander. So is the card a Commander, not a reprint. Cool. Year before 2020, because again, 2020 was the year of Commander. So, back in 2020, or before 2020, I should say 2019, December 31st, on that day, we had exactly 863 cards that could be your Commander, essentially. And with that, again, over how many years? Like, how old is Magic? 93, essentially, right, is when it came out, right? 93, 94? A long time, right? A long, long time. Like 27 years of history, essentially, at that point, right around there. We had 863 Commanders. Then the year of Commander happened, and things already had started focusing on Commander a little bit, but things shifted a ton. And with that, that does impact other formats. Now, with the Commander products themselves, those might not. I mean, they focus on taking resources away from designing other products that are for the other formats. That does. But the actual, Commander products don't affect them, right? You can't use a Commander Precon or some of the cards from it, right? The Commander-specific cards in Standard. That being said, that doesn't mean that Commander's influence isn't heavily impacting Standard in certain ways. For example, from 2020 and on, so again, the exact same, search except for, year greater than 2019. So 2020 plus, essentially. We've got 1,249 Commanders. Legendary, specific, focused Commanders from 2019 and on. So it's kind of hard to say that, like, the actual focus, even on Standard products, hasn't shifted to the point where it, again, is so Commander-focused that, sure, you might say that you've got enough resources attuned to this, but because you need to print so many Commanders in each product to actually sell it to Commander players as well, you are most definitely impacting those formats in one way or another, because as many Standard players pointed out in the last episode when I discussed this, basically, there are rare and mythic slots that are going to be dedicated to legendary creatures because they're Commanders and because they've got powerful effects. And therefore, those are spots that are not dedicated to cards that could help with certain aspects of Standard. I myself am not a Standard player. I used to play a long, long time ago. Absolutely love Glade Cover Scout. Little Boggles. Love it. Anyways, back in Theros. That was great. Anyways, I am not aware of, what is going on currently in Standard, what is big and that kind of stuff as well. But I can understand that when Wizards dedicate certain chunks of a set to Commander in particular, it is going to dilute and take away from the actual format that is Standard. Also draft, other things as well, obviously. And things that those impact too, like, Modern, etc., etc., etc. But Standard, especially since its card pool is the smallest out of all the formats, essentially. When it comes to other things as well, to move on to another search, just cards that are currently legal in Standard. There are 3,037 cards that are currently legal in Standard. And as you can see, obviously, some of these are pretty popular in Commander as well. Evolving Wilds, it's cool, very cool. But when it comes to, again, the number of Commanders, I just want you really quick, just take a thought experiment right now and just think about, okay, cards that are currently legal in Standard that also can be your Commander. Just think a number right now. Think of a number and think about what that might be. Again, this is not including, Commander Precon Commanders. This is just including currently cards that are legal in Standard. Okay, here we go. So legal in Standard is Commander. We've got 307. Essentially, 10% of the cards that are in Standard right now are legal Commanders. Most likely, cards that are legendary creatures. Now, how different is that from 15, 20 years ago? Just go back to when Standard actually was in its heyday And, the tournaments were a huge focus and a big draw, and Grand Prix were amazing back in the old days, right? So think about how many legendary creatures were in those sets back then. How much was dedicated to them back then? I mean, I can't imagine it was that many of you. I always look back in like Onslaught, right? I mean, not that I don't know if the tournament scene was in there. I wasn't good enough to be up in that. When I was in Standard, essentially, I didn't pay that much attention to the tournament scene because I wasn't good enough to be in it. That being said, I went back and looked at Onslaught, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and I should have done this now. But basically, there was like 8 legendary creatures, right? Because legendary creatures were more of like a flavor, essentially, to the actual set. It was like, oh, okay, yeah. Corona False God, or, Sylvos Rogue Elemental. Wow, it's really cool. But there's like 8 of them. And maybe some things worked around with them in tournament play, but yeah, now these days, it's like, oh no, 10% of your card pool for a format that is not focused on legendary creatures are legendary because of this other influential, format, essentially, that we want to draw players from that as well to buy that product. And to do that, we need to put commander-specific things in there. And this is just the example just for commanders, right? Obviously, there are other commander-specific cards that maybe aren't that great in Standard that are amazing in Commander that take up a spot. Again, like a Smothering Tithe, right? Back in, what was that, one of the Ravnica sets, essentially? How good is Smothering Tithe in one-on-one? Nowhere near as good as it is in multiplayer. The draw for it is nowhere near as good because you're playing with just one other player, and if they don't pay the 2, you get 1 treasure token. Versus in multiplayer, in Commander, the trip around the table, you're probably getting at least 3 treasure tokens, if not more, and if not, you tax each opponent for 2, which is much more valuable. Much more valuable than just only taxing 1, right? For the same effect, for the same value that you're getting out of that card. So there are dedicated slots for that. Mark can say whatever he wants, essentially, about, oh, we are still focusing on Standard, but when the big draw to you selling product right now is Commander, not shortcuts aren't going to be taken, that's not what I'm trying to say, but you are going to spin things in a way that you can still sell it to Commander players, and because of that, it does affect the quality of the product overall. Instead of, in the days when Standard was the main format, quality focus was on Standard and Draft and those things, right? It wasn't focused on this other entity that is the same game as, Standard in a way, right? The same rules for the most part, except major changes to those rules where, again, you have more life, you have more opponents, you have different things that you're working towards. You've got a commander and a command zone, which is completely separate from that. You've got these aspects of the game that are completely different, and because of that, it can heavily impact a format that others care about. And I guess my point to this is more so that, again, when Mark is responding to these things, again, I do appreciate the response. But I also realize, and I think many others do as well, that it's a very PR-specific response. And, it's trying to give the community some kind of response that they think that they'll accept, while also not saying the entire truth of it, too. Moving on. So, legal in Standard 2023, not a reprint right now. So, in last year, let's just take a look at last year, okay? Last year in specific. Non-reprint cards, so brand new cards for Standard. We got 1,114 cards last year. When it comes to last year, we also got an additional 810 cards that are not legal in Standard. So, again, when it comes to the amount of focus and the amount of dedication to Standard, when it comes to the amount of products that are coming out that are, again, and the vast majority of these that are outside of Standard are specifically for Commander, nearly half the cards that came out last year were Commander-specific cards. Or cards that are legal in other formats outside of Standard, I should say. But, yeah, those tend to be focused on Commander. I mean, if you just look at, essentially, the ones that are coming as the most popular ones on EDH Rec, right, are the Lord of the Rings cards, essentially, right? And you can't tell me that the One Ring, Delighted Halfling, all those cards were not made with Commander in mind, Orcish Bowmasters, those types of cards. I mean, Mithril Coat is literally just one of the most popular cards in Commander. Darksteel Plate, modified. That's basically it. And just Restoration, again, Cultivate, modified in a way, essentially. Delighted Halfling, Birds of Paradise, modified. Again, modified with a Commander twist. Again, it's specific toward legendary spells. So, yes, it is Commander modified. These other products are specifically tailored toward Commander. And again, when you have over half of the products, not over half, nearly half the products, essentially, nearly half the cards coming out focused on Commander. And then in Standard too, again, within that, how many of those cards are focused on Commander as well? I mean, if you look at Roaming Throne, that card is made for Commander. That card is focused on Commander, right? That is literally the way that it was designed, is like, hey, you can throw this in nearly any Commander deck. I mean, not nearly any, like your Commander has to have a trigger activated ability, right? Or it's going to be a tribal deck, essentially. Mondrak, Glory Dominus, all right? Hey, cool, doubling tokens. What's one of the most popular things out there in Commander? Well, first of all, treasures. So that's token. But also creature token decks. Going wide strategies as well. Cake or Bloom. All right, that's basically what, like, gosh, what's the elf that enters the battlefield? That Reclamation Sage. There you go. It's kind of like Reclamation Sage adjusted. The proliferate. I mean, there's other ones that do that too, like that 3/1 that's in white, but still. You know what I mean? Popular kinds of cards that are in Commander, the focus is going to shift. Right? When it comes to these standard cards, the focus isn't entirely on Standard. And you go with all these other products, all these other focuses, I can see how someone in another format who really cares about that format can be very frustrated that the amount of focus that should be paid to it isn't paid to it, because, again, every single product has to have Commander focus. And the main driver of sales might be Commander focus for them too. So again, when it's the other formats, it's kind of like left on the back burner when it comes to focus on them, essentially. And again, they need to meet a certain threshold to actually be an appeal to Commander players by putting in those Commander-specific cards like a Roaming Throne. To put in those specific cards, like, you know, again, like, what would I say? We had the, essentially, you know, what is it? 800? Yeah, 1,249 Commanders, Commanders since 2020 started. Versus beforehand, we had 863. And you can't tell me that doesn't impact Standard. And again, what Mark said. You can say that, hey, Standard play is significantly up. Feedback rating from tournament players that are enjoying the current environment. Love to see those details. Love to see the numbers on that. Again, is that Arena that is up? Because, again, that is different from printing the product versus actually just putting it online. You're still getting impacted, though, by Commander when it comes to the actual content of Standard, when it comes to those cards in Standard that you can utilize, because there is that Commander twist to certain cards. So yeah, it's just, again, it's nice that Mark responds. I do appreciate that Mark actually interacts with the community versus having no interaction at all. But again, when the response is more of like a PR response, I don't appreciate that. It's not, I'm not trying to say that Mark's trying to pull the wool over the community's eyes, that kind of stuff as well, but come on, like, don't try to say that everything's okay and that the amount of products that, you know, Commander is putting out right now is just not absurd. Again, that question wasn't even addressed, essentially. I know Commander products sell super well, but I feel like from a design perspective, sales can't be the other concern. Mark didn't respond to that. That, like, you know, like, hey, basically, oh, no, this is the right amount, essentially, of products. And in a previous one, actually, Mark kind of did say something where, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically like, if the product sells, it's a good thing, essentially. Paraphrasing, not trying to put words in Mark's mouth. It was something around those lines, basically like sales equal the community wanted it, essentially. And I highly disagree with that. There are definitely things that are seemingly very short-term focused right now. And again, with the amount of Commander products that are being printed, the amount of Commander products that are being printed, you can't even keep up with that, but also just the amount of Commander-specific things in sets too. The balance is just like gone at this point, where again, Commander players such as myself and playing for a long, long time, you can't keep up anymore. And again, I do this for a living. You can't keep up anymore. No one can keep up anymore at all. And Wizards try to say, well, every product's not for everyone. It's like, well, if you're a Commander player, you kind of have to pay attention, because every product essentially is legal in Commander. Every single product you make is legal in Commander, especially these days, because, yeah, you want to sell it. And Commander is your cash cow. So it's just, I'd love to hear from you in the comments what your thoughts on this. Again, different perspectives. Maybe you're reading into this a completely different way. And Standard players out there, I'd love to hear from you. I heard from many of you in the comments last time as well. It just seems like, again, that there's this push and pull with Wizards right now, and it's mostly just pulling toward Commander, and the focus is entirely on Commander. Every product is on Commander, even products that aren't supposed to be for Commander. Again, like Modern Horizon, supposed to be specifically for modern players, right? Has a massive Commander spin already in the actual set itself. I mean, which we have not seen yet, but if there's anything like Modern Horizons 2, which was jokingly called Commander Horizons by many out there because of just how Commander it was, then you've got the Commander precons for Modern Horizons 2 that are not legal in Modern, even though they're called Modern Horizons 3 Commander precons. It doesn't make any sense, okay? So yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on all this. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.